Welcome to another episode of the Agile for Agilists podcast. I am your host, Drew Podwall, and with me today is my other host, Brad Nelson.
Hey, everyone.
And today, I always say this, it's an exciting episode. I am excited for this episode. Brad's been gone. This is the first time I'm seeing you now in 2 weeks, and I feel like you and I, for the past maybe 4 months, have at least been on a Zoom call or been recording a podcast once a week. Early days, it was like almost every other day that we were jumping on some sort
Yeah.
of conference call.
Yeah, I think longer than 4 months. Yeah. Yeah, we've been pretty tightly tied together. And yeah, 2 weeks has been a long time.
It's been a while, man. I miss
Yeah.
you.
I feel like I'm a guest now on our podcast.
Yeah. Well, why don't you tell us where you've been for the past 2 weeks, Brad?
Yes, I've been hiding under a rock. No, I've been traveling the world. The first place I went was Miami. So I'm sure a few people are jealous, especially in the Midwest, that I got to go to Miami in the middle of winter. It was hot. I had forgotten how hot it was. And that was at the Agile International Conference. So I was accepted to speak there to give my presentation, The Velocity Trap, which I've given a few times now. And so that was really exciting, completely new conference for me, completely new circle of people. If you don't go to a lot of conferences, you might not know that every conference kind of has their own clique. It's like a set group of speakers and people and volunteers, and it's usually regionally based. So it was really cool to meet so many new people. And then after that, I had to go to Dallas for a conference called Transform. And Transform's interesting because it's an internal conference to my company. My company, to my knowledge, has 3 internal conferences, at least in North America. I think there's some in like EMEA and stuff, but we have internal conferences that are geared towards different things, and we have a lot of partners with my company. We're a consultancy. We lean pretty heavily on our partners, and so our partners essentially fund this to allow us to speak to each other and like to grow and to share our expertise as a company, and then also to get kind of like the scoop on what's the new cool things that are coming from our partners, what is their area of focus. So for example, the other one that I usually go to is called Mastery. It's much bigger. It tends to be a lot, I'll say less technical. We're a technology company, so everything's technical, but slightly less technical. And Microsoft was there, and they were talking about like renewable energy and their focus on the impacts of the planet. And I forget the actual term for it, but you know, how we can help clean things up. And so that was pretty cool to hear from them.
Let me ask you a question real quick, because I want to get some clarity on something. When you say your partners, are you talking about your clients, or are you talking about like other vendors, or?
No, technology companies, right? So like we are Microsoft's top partner in multiple categories, which means that if Microsoft sells a Fortune 500 company an Azure license, Microsoft doesn't help them install it. They field that
Gotcha.
out to partners. So like
Yep.
that's something we do for them. We're
Okay.
partners with Apple and Red Hat and Cisco and just about any company you can think of.
Gotcha. So you guys brought in speakers from all of these companies to talk about what the new technology is and the new features and bells and whistles and the new products that are being developed.
Yeah.
Probably some case studies from other clients that they're showcasing and stuff like that.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So like NVIDIA was there and they were talking about like their new AI stuff that they're working on. And
That's really cool.
yeah, it's really cool. And so we have our partner talks, but then we have our internal talks. So internally, any employee can submit to give a presentation, and there's a board that says whether or not they think it's something valuable for now, right, for this instance of it. And so you have the internal message from our experts of, you know, hey, here's the things that we're working on or the things that we should be aware of or the future we should be creating.
That's really cool. So are you allowed to talk about some of the talks at the internal conference, or is that proprietary information?
I can talk about some of it for sure. So the talk that I got asked to give was the same one I got asked to give last year, and I'll be asked to give it multiple times again. And it's called Platforms as a Product. And so platform engineering is blowing up right now. It's very popular. And I've written an article about it on our solution website as well. So that's why, like, it's already public knowledge. I've already shared a lot of the information. And really, it's just about applying the product mindset to a platform team. And I mean, it's going to be the next big thing. Some people call it the DevOps killer, which I think is ridiculous because it uses DevOps. And DevOps is right in Agile, under the Agile umbrella. And the whole idea is that, like in Agile, we talk about cross-functional teams. Right? You need to be able to deploy across the full stack in order to realize your solution in production. And any sort of handoff is a waste and ineffective. And so we don't want that. And so for years, we've been fighting this kind of component team setup that organizations naturally do, where it's like, oh, I have to, open a support ticket with middleware to get this database update so that I can push this out. Well, what we're finding, though, as well, is that developers don't want to do everything. And there's some maybe misunderstandings with teams as well. When we say cross-functional, people think everyone on the team has to do everything. Not the case. But teams are struggling, and then a lot of teams are solving the same problems, and then they start spending more time like worrying about security of their database and worrying about the structure and maintaining libraries and all that stuff that doesn't actually contribute to the value that their team was created to provide. And so then it's like, okay, well, maybe we should go back to component teams. Oh, well, now we have the same problem, the same struggle. Well, if you apply the product mindset to your component team, and I'm using air quotes here, you essentially treat it like they're a third-party vendor. So for example, if you buy hosting from a cloud provider like Google or AWS or Azure, you can log in, and then you have APIs, control panels, all of that, where you can use their tool without immediately, self-service, without opening support tickets or anything. And so the idea is you create that same structure internally so that your internal teams can leverage your internal platform, self-service, without any hiccups.
I align with that. The two things I want to throw into the mix there is one, most of the teams that I work with don't do a good job with identifying NFRs, non-functional requirements, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like security and performance and load and all of that stuff, right? Ideally, like epics and features, right, should have NFRs. Well, there should be like global NFRs that just are static and everybody's aware of them. And then if there's additional constraints that need to be placed onto like an epic or a feature, then those NFRs travel with the epic and the feature and get inherited into the stories that get created. And the thing from that perspective is that improves quality and improves rework, right? And then it reduces the strain that you've got on the need to have a separate component team. The other thing that I was thinking as you were talking is that, and I'm not sure what the right answer is. I'm just kind of like I usually do sometimes, where I just kind of spout off an idea that I'm still like marinating on in my head. But
Yeah.
the overlap between a Scrum team or Scrum teams and various communities of practice, right? And the idea that you could have a component team community of practice, right? Or you could have like a data scientist community of practice, or Scrum Master community of practice, or product owner community of practice, or various different types of architecture communities of practice. And you could be a member of many of those communities of practice, right? And also be a member of your Scrum team. And so this way, if you're on a Scrum team and you're working on something that requires infrastructure and whatnot, and you're a member, and somebody on your team is a member of that infrastructure community of practice, right? Which then would enable knowledge sharing to happen and might eliminate the need or decrease the need even further for having like specialized component teams.
Yeah, like tribes and guilds, kind of like the Spotify model. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah. Like the Scrum team is the place where I do my job with other people who are solving complex problems and innovating on a daily basis, right? And the total sum of all the Scrum team members are members of many of the various communities of practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I've never seen that model like really be deployed in that way, but I feel like there's a lot of trust that goes into that. And also, you really got to crack your head to the left and say, all right, so now I'm a member of a Scrum team, but I'm also have to be a part of like 3 communities of practice or 4 communities of practice. Like, isn't that going to take time away from my day? But then the other side of the coin is, well, by being members of those community of practice, the quality of your work will go up, the knowledge sharing goes up, your innovation goes up.
Mm-hmm.
You as a person become more knowledgeable. But I've never seen that. I've never seen that actually deployed in that way. That's really just hypothetical one for me.
Yeah, I mean, all of these things that we're talking about are scaling problems. Like to me, a platform team is a scaling thing. You're not going to do it at a startup if you only have one team. It's you have multiple teams, and the same thing with the guilds approach. When I was at Meyer, we had 2 mobile app teams, and they did that where they met to talk about like architecture and development things, but it was only 2 teams, and so I feel like that was pretty easy. I think it would get, to your point, exponentially harder the more teams there were. And we kind of did a platform team there as well, which I at the time I didn't really like realize it or think about it, and I wasn't necessarily a proponent for it, but I became the voice of it because as us Scrum Masters tend to. It
Yeah.
was something the developers wanted, they believed in. I heard it out, and I was like, okay, yeah, I see some legitimacy in this, and then I became that voice that fought the good fight with leadership, and it became a reality at the end, and it was very similar. It was a service team, but what we realized is they weren't doing work with their other teams most of the time, their Scrum teams. So as I mentioned, they were working on their mobile apps, and the mobile apps use the services in order to function, but the services existed long before the apps, and we just kind of adopted them and used them. And then we would get on their roadmap for new enhancements, as needed. But they did a lot of work with the stores themselves and like connecting our discount software. So any discount in the store, any coupon, sale, anything, use their service, as well as like just to know prices in general. And so they worked with the stores, they worked with the website, they worked with the internal software for managing that. So they were maintaining these services and doing work that didn't align to the other teams more times than they were doing work with the team.
The one that I love is whenever I show up on site and the systems team is known as the DevOps team. And I'm like, DevOps is not the name of a team. It's a culture and a mindset.
Yeah, that's a struggle.
But the one that I'm thinking of that stands out the most was I was standing up an Agile release train, and the system team convinced leadership that they were just too busy doing systems stuff to attend the first PI planning. And we got them to be part of the Safe for Teams training ahead of PI planning, but I think they wound up leaving like halfway through day 2 to go to their systems team stuff. But the cool thing was by the end of the first PI, as we were getting ready for the second PI, they came to me and they were like, hey, Drew, we actually want to be a part of this, but we just don't know how, because we have work that, comes up day to day that can't be planned for. And then we have platform enhancements and improvements that we're doing that can be planned for. And so we just don't know how to deal with that. And I was like, well, we could resolve that, right? Like we could come up with some sort of hybrid model where certain classes of tickets are Kanban and other classes of tickets are Scrum tickets that are planned out, right? And, we could forecast that maybe 60% of your time or 30% of your time or whatever that is dealing with like one-off emergencies. And then, we, from a capacity planning perspective, we know that we can allocate X amount of work. And so then we got into PI planning, and for the first time ever, right, they're taking all of these features, right, that they'd created before, and they were breaking them down into the stories. And they realized that even without allocating time for their fire drills that they have to do on a daily basis, they had like 3 times more work that they were committing to. uh,
Sounds right.
in the PI. And the cool part was they were so grateful about that, right? Because they hadn't realized that. They were like, well, what do we do about this? And I said, well, let's go find the product manager and the architect and talk to them about this problem and ask them how they want to solve it instead of like you guys trying to solve it, because you've already said you have 3 times more work than you can sustainably do. And there's no reason why you need to figure out how to fit 9 months worth of work in 3 months.
Right.
And they were like, oh, we could do that. And we're like, yeah, because SAFe tells us we can do that, and people have a way of seeing that visually, and then they could do something with that. So
I don't think it's necessarily like, oh, SAFe just tells us we can do it. There's no rule that says we can't do it. It's like self-imposed. Like we think that we can't say no, or we can't say like, okay, when do you need it? Or I'll get to it after this. We just think we always have to say yes.
well, I think part of it though is the visualization of your work. Once you actually can create that visualization of capacity and overcapacity and dependencies and all of that, that's something that anybody in the company can look at, right?
Right. Yes.
And clearly see what the problem is, right? Like you don't have to be an engineer to see that you can't fit 20 gallons of beer in a pint glass, right? Like,
Right.
um,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Visualizing your work or just visuals in general are so powerful. It's why pretty much everything that we do, it's like, well, let's use a PowerPoint deck. Right? There's the joke, leaders speak in PowerPoints. And it's because if you visualize it, it's more tangible.
yeah, I got to learn your PowerPoint alchemy. Like you've got some great PowerPoint game. I'm
Thank
like,
you.
I have a hard time like not writing like eons worth of paragraphs on each page, but
It starts that way. It's you work down, you refine over time, you smooth the stone, and I probably spend more time than I need to on it.
so how many conferences have you spoken at so far?
This year, um,
Jerk.
I mean I've spoken at over 20 over the last few years. This year I had Code Mash in January, which was in Sandusky. That was fun. That was a developer focused conference where they let me share the velocity trap there, and I love talking to people who aren't agilists, because I feel like as agilists we kind of hear the same stuff over and over again. I want to hear what they think of it, and I think other people need to hear it. So I love that. That was a lot of fun. And then I just had the AIC in Miami, which is phenomenal. Velocity Trap as well. And then my platforms as a product talk at Transform are the 3 that I've done this year.
Gotcha. So let's talk about Miami, right? Because I feel like we could probably have more freedom of discussion about what happened in Miami than what happened in Texas.
Definitely, yeah. I'm gonna self-market a second though and say I just got accepted to Agile and Beyond in June. I'll be in Detroit.
Agile and Beyond?
Yes. Yep.
Very, very cool.
Yeah. So, and then May 4th, I'll be virtually speaking at Good Tech Fest.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
That's awesome.
that's it so far.
We got to carve out some time at some point so I can figure out how to get on this conference thing as well.
Yeah. Yeah. We should do a joint talk.
And we could also we should definitely do a joint talk. That'd be a lot of fun. But we could theoretically, is your microphone USB or is it XLR?
It's both. I use USB right now, but it's both.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we could theoretically bring these to a conference. They're like, I know mine at least is one of the things they say is like, you could bring it to a sports stadium and you could adjust the mic so that you're, don't hear the crowd drowning you out. So I feel like we could walk around. I'll carry this boom arm around over my shoulder and clamp it onto the booths.
Do the Freddie Mercury, like half a mic stand.
Yeah.
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 So I didn't go to it, but at the Agile international conference, they had someone doing a live podcast as one of the sessions. I don't remember what it was. When I looked at it, it didn't look like it was Agile related, and so I was like, yeah, I'm out. So I should look up and see what it was. So that was kind of cool. That was different.
So what are the highlights? What are some of the
Yeah.
highlights?
Yeah. So I believe Rick, probably going to butcher your last name. Sorry, man. Regiera is the guy that is overseeing all of it. And he works for transformation experts. And so my understanding is that company facilitates the whole thing. And then they have sponsors and the sort. So this is their second year. Their first year was apparently a lot smaller. This one was significantly bigger. It was at FIU, Florida International University. And they took care of me as a speaker, like more than anywhere else. Like they had promotional materials that they made for me. I've never had a conference do that before. They had their own deck. They had an onboarding call. They were very eager to please, almost to a fault. Like at one point I was just kind of like, I've done this before. It's okay. I got it. Um, so that was really cool. And all the proceeds went to like a women in tech thing or something like that. So they didn't pay my lodging, which most conferences do. Thankfully, my company Insight is very generous when it comes to that stuff and covered it for me. I feel very fortunate that my company sponsors me to present in that way.
Yeah. You've got a great role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so it's in Miami, it's on FIU. And one of the things that like really kind of just was so awesome is that they have their opening keynote with Rick and he's talking about, well, I wasn't in the keynote, but he talks about this transformational work that he's done with TrackPhone, like the TrackPhone. And the CEO of TrackPhone and the CMO of TrackPhone are there to corroborate his story. And they're like giving him praise. And they're talking about like how much it's changed them as leaders. And Rick's making the point of how important it is for leaders to be involved in the Agile transformation. And essentially, it's impossible, right, to be successful without the right leadership. And you never see that, like ever, like barely ever do you see companies openly speaking about this, but then to actually go their way to the conference, I was like, man, this Rick guy's got something going on. Like he must know what he's doing and he must be killing it.
Well, were there other CEOs you think in the audience that like needed to hear that, or was it just like coaches and scrum masters and
I mean, that's a great question. I do know some were there, some CEOs were there, but I think more like consultancy type CEOs.
Yeah.
So probably not the ones that needed to hear it. And that's one of, I would say, I don't want to say complaint, that feels strong, but one of the things that I'm noticing and observing is when I go to Agile conferences, I do typically say things that other people aren't saying. So that's just kind of how I think and I act, and I don't want to just regurgitate what everyone else is saying. But I'm still kind of preaching to other Agilists. And so I'm building great connections and great bonds with Agilists that help me to become a better Agilist, but I'm not getting this message outside of the Agile industry, and I'm not getting it to the people that need to hear it, that either generate more work for myself or my company or impact the larger industry.
Maybe we should change the name of the podcast to the CEOs for CEOs podcast.
Yeah,
and this way we'll trick CEOs to listen to us, and they'll be like, "Oh my God, these guys are onto something. They're so right."
Yeah. So Agile International Conference. One of the CEOs that was there gave a talk. So he was the CEO and founder of a company called Silver Logic. His name was David Hartman, and he had this really fascinating talk as well. Partially because it leaned on gaming, and as everyone knows by now, I'm a huge game nerd. I'm also a generalist, and it kind of spoke to that. So he's created this tool based off of this internal thing they were doing. I think it's called Wayfinder, where instead of having like that typical, like here's an associate level, and here's your regular level, and here's your slightly senior level, and here's your more senior level, and here's your super senior level role within a hierarchy, he creates like little skill paths based off of different skills that you could learn. And they may not necessarily be the standard ones for your particular role. So you can be more cross-functional, which is something that I definitely am. And then he ties incentives to that. So he's like, if you master this tree, like you are worth X amount more to me. So you can get like little incremental raises by mastering and demonstrating these different skills. Yeah.
So
I
tell me more about it. How does this merit
yeah.
program work?
So I mean, I'm trying to remember examples that he had, but I'll just make one up. So it's like, you're a Scrum Master, and a part of being a Scrum Master is you have to know Scrum. And so you would figure out like, okay, what are the different like aspects of Scrum that someone needs to know? And then once you master it, you would get like a $2,000 raise or something. And it's something he uses internally at his company, but I will say once again, it's a small company, small consultancy. So I don't know how this would scale to like a Fortune 500, but I'm very fascinated by this
Yeah.
idea.
See, I like the idea of looking at that as a spike. Like what I said in one of the last podcasts about a spike being a way to inject knowledge into the team, and that if somebody picks up a spike to research a problem, one of the default acceptance criteria that I like to create for every spike is that they have to create a presentation to the team on their findings from the spike, or maybe even across at the team of teams layer. So I like the idea. I definitely like the idea of like, all right, you take your CSM, you get a bump in pay. You take a leadership course, you get a bump in pay. But I also like the idea of that the acceptance criteria for that is not just attending the class, not just passing it, not just passing it with a certain score, but also like creating some sort of either article or video or something to demonstrate an aspect of what you've learned and present that to everybody else, right? As the last act of, confirmation that you've had that achievement.
Yeah, yeah. I don't remember the exact examples he gave, but there was a demonstration part of it. It's not just like, oh, I know all this stuff, so I get more money.
Yeah, that's cool. So what else? What are some other highlights that stand out to you?
So I went to a few talks and I was kind of live, I was going to say tweeting, what is it, linking? LinkedIn. I was sharing a few posts as I was there, which I think caught a few people off guard because it's pretty common as a speaker to just kind of like hide in the speaker's lounge and only show up for your thing. But I was like, no, like I want to take advantage of this. I want to see what other people are saying. I want to meet some other people. And so like the one person that stood out to me was Quincy Jones. He was this presenter. Fantastic name for one.
Wait, the Quincy Jones?
No, I'm sorry. Quincy Jordan was his name.
Oh,
Yeah, my bad. Sorry, Quincy. Quincy Jordan, still a very awesome name. But the thing like that stood out to me is that he started it with music, and he had different sounds throughout his presentation built in. A few of them I would say were better done than others, but when you introduce yourself to "My name is," you immediately have my attention. But his was awesome because it also kind of resonates with things that like I've dipped my fingers in and I've talked about as far as psychology and Agile. And his whole thing was that if Agile is a mindset, then we need to know how the mind works, and we need to learn ways to affect people's mindset.
yeah.
Yeah,
But we're not a cult.
but we're not a cult. Yeah, yeah. I mean, he talked about like influence and all of that stuff that we talk about. Yeah, yeah, because we're totally not a cult.
There's a coach, and I'm not going to say his name. There's a coach who reached out to me a while back on LinkedIn. Kind of hard sell kind of guy. He wanted to be my mentor, wanted money for that. Definitely saw value in it. Really nice guy. But I started to notice that he was like, and I didn't realize what he was doing until like a year later, but he would neg me. I really felt like he was using pickup artist tactics and techniques to try to convince me to purchase his mentoring services. And like the first time around, I didn't realize he was negging me, right? And I was like, hey, listen, your approach and the way that I like to collaborate with others doesn't feel like it's a good fit, right? And so then 3 months later, he reached out to me again, and it was he recognized that what he did, and he apologized for it, and we reset the clock a bit. I still didn't purchase the service, but then 3 months ago, I reached back out to him. The podcast had just launched. I was really excited, and there were some other things that were going on, and I had this great idea for something that I was working on that I'm not working on right now. But And I brought it up to him, hey, I feel like this is something that you and I could work on together. And he absolutely just negged me. And I was like, dude, you're using pickup artistry on me. Um, so there are coaches out there that are using lots of different psychological principles, even like pickup artistry principles and whatnot. And I think that's fascinating. I always say, like, Agile coach is like a therapist, except we're not licensed therapists.
Yeah, we're more dangerous. Um,
Yeah.
there's a book called Influence, and I think there's a subtitle, but it's Influence, and I forget the guy's name. It's harder for me to pronounce, which is why I can never remember it. But I have it on Audible, and I was like, man, I really need the physical copy of this because I need to take some notes. And it's long, so I haven't finished it yet, but I'm probably halfway through it. And he talks about the different forms of influence and ways that we can influence each other. And reciprocity principle is one of them. So I give you something, and then you feel like you need to give me something. And it's very, very common in sales. And it doesn't matter what it is. I give you, a piece of candy, and now you subconsciously feel like you owe me. And it's funny because I had a door-to-door salesman knock on my door today, which I have not had in forever. And I didn't know what he was selling at first. It was a Kirby vacuum, which I was like, wow, they still do that? But the very first thing he does, he introduces himself very politely, and he hands me a roll of disinfecting wipes, which is a weird gift. And I take it, and he's like, that's for you. I'm not here to sell anything. I'm just here I get paid to do demonstrations. And as soon as he handed it to me, I'm like, this guy's trying to use this reciprocity principle on me. Not cool.
Yeah.
And because I'm aware of it, it almost has an adverse reaction to me. And I heard him out. He wanted to do a demo or whatever. And I was like, I might have COVID, so I don't think now's a good time. And then he was like, oh, yep, got to go. Which is true. We didn't mention that yet. I got really sick after I returned from Texas. And so I may be a little rough on the voice today, but definitely a lot better today.
Yeah. So were there any exercises that Quincy Jordan, not Jones?
Yes, Jordan. Sorry, Quincy. I'm terrible with names. You asked me that now, and I'm drawing a blank of it. I know he had some pretty good points, and he ended up having to wrap it up a bit at the end because there was just a lot of conversation that was happening. And I think he lost track of the time a little bit. But a lot of it was, I think, just being aware of people's mindset and creating space and not being overly domineering. So that was something he talked about a lot. And one of the guys in the crowd said he knows he's the domineering voice. So he actually counts to 10. He says something and then counts to 10 and waits for people to respond before he continues. So creating space was a really big one for him.
Well, that's cool self-awareness, and that's a great technique.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the big conundrum we've talked about on the podcast before is you're expected to create change. And so if you're expected to create change, then your natural tendency is to want to lean in to create that change. But the right approach to it from a psychological safety perspective, from what you said in the last podcast, got to remember that companies are made of people and people have emotions, right? The right approach is not to go leaning in right away, right? It's to observe, it's to see, it's to listen and ask questions. I wrote a great article that's been getting some traction about this. There's a lot of people that I see posting questions on lots of forums about, I just got my first job as a Scrum Master, and what do I do? And so I wrote this article from the standpoint of what do you do if you're a day one Scrum Master? And it's all about pretty much what you shouldn't do, right? It's just leaning back and watching. And because if you go in like a bull in a china shop and start pointing at the Scrum guide and all that, you're never going to repair that damage, or it'll take you a while to repair the damage. So
right. Yeah, that's a common mistake that I see even experienced Scrum Masters do their first day in the job is, the Scrum Guide says, and it's the Scrum Guide is a great source, but until you're solving people's problems with the different practices in the guide, it's not going to resonate.
Well, you know what it is, Brad? Where that comes from is, when you show up on day one of a job, you're the new person on the block, and your natural tendency And the natural expectation is to show value, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the expectation is show me your value, right?
Right.
And it's a real trust fall to when you're in that situation to provide value by asking questions, to provide value by listening, to provide value by finding out what their team's needs are in a way that isn't overly pushy or trying to influence change.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
it's a little uncomfortable to say, all right, well, tell me a bit about how this works here with you guys, right? And do some back of the room coaching. But I think that's the trap that people fall into. And the other time where that comes into play as well is the idea that, like, oftentimes you show up day one of your job, you're in your manager's office, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they don't understand Agile and Scrum either. And, they're giving you the wrong signal of go get them. And so that's what you do. You go and you get them, but you don't wind up getting them.
Right. Back on the conference in Miami, we just mentioned transformation. The other thing that really stuck out to me is Veronica Stewart gave this presentation of what she's doing with her company, and she called it like Shark Tank. But the book that she mentioned was Radical Product Thinking, and I've never read it before. Wasn't even familiar with it. So it's something I want to look into at some point. My book list is long, and I haven't been reading as much, so I'm not committing audience to reading this anytime soon. But it was interesting in that she talked about the importance of treating your agile transformation like it's a product.
I've talked about that with you before.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and I was thinking about this before when you were talking about platform teams. The way that I look at a Scrum team is that the product owner is the product person responsible for the product that the customer is putting their hands on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the lead engineer, lead developer on the team, they're responsible for the product of platform stability and best practices. And the Scrum Master is a product owner of their team's agile capabilities. And then that scales up where you've got a product, and safe at least. But the product manager is still the product manager for the customer value. The architect is the product owner for ensuring platform stability at the team of teams level. And the Agile, the RTE is the product owner for the Agile release train's Agile capabilities as a product. And so I love that. Radical. So her name is Veronica.
Yeah, Veronica Stewart.
Veronica Stewart.
It's
and
not
she's
her.
the author of the book, or no?
She is not. No.
Okay.
Nope. I forget the author's name, but it's something that she was leveraging. And so I would say, I feel like the analogy isn't like exact one-to-one when we say Scrum Master is the product owner of the process, because I feel like the lead engineer and the actual product owner, there's a little bit more telling. Like they have a little bit more of like, well, this is priority. This is, what we need to do. Whereas a Scrum Master, I would say, is more suggesting and guiding. But in general, I think I agree with that statement. In the way that she was describing it, it was more like at a higher organizational level. And it was more like, what is our goal? What are our metrics? How are we going to measure the success? And then like she has to sell this, like, and we all do. We all, when we're in an organization where we're trying to promote Agile and create Agile adoption, it very rarely looks like this official transformation. And most people don't say like, hey, let's go do a transformation, right? You're essentially selling this idea of working in a better way. And so you need to think about that. Like, what is my sales pitch? What's my approach? What's going to resonate with my customers who are internal people that need to adopt Agile? And what does my leadership need to see to be bought in and to feel like I'm going in the right direction? And out of all of the Agile things that we could be doing, what is the highest value right now? Right? What is the easiest to deliver? So on and so forth.
It reminds me of, I was doing some research last week. People don't want to buy products, they want to buy outcomes,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the famous quote from Clayton Christensen is, nobody wants to buy a drill, they want to buy a 1/4 inch hole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think a lot of that mindset comes into play when you're thinking about like the agile transformation. Developers and architects and engineers and product owners, right? They don't know about the agile transformation. It's something that is really kind of impacting them, happening to them. They may be bought into it, they might not be bought into it, but that's definitely not their like reason for being. Their reason for being is developing code and solving problems and whatnot. And so if you're thinking about the product versus outcome perspective, if you focus on the outcomes with the people who are part of the organization,
Mm-hmm.
um, that's a great way for them to buy into the ethereal idea of a transformation, of going through this change process.
Right. Yeah, so you said outcome, which brings me to my talk.
Okay.
So
I was
my
going to
talk,
save the best for last. I just want you to
yeah,
know, you know.
yeah, I'll slip you the money on the table. Thanks for the setup. Um, so my talk is called The Velocity Trap. Hopefully it's provocative enough to interest people to go. Although I did get feedback from a conference that I was not accepted to that said that they felt trap was being overused right now. And I was like, I want you to know I wrote this 2019. But anyway, so it's called the velocity trap. And the reason is because, in my mind, velocity is the most abused metric we have in IT, in the agile industry. And this goes into our talk that I don't think we scheduled yet.
No, but we should do. I wrote it down while we were talking. We should reach out to Amanda and see if she's available next Thursday night so we could do it.
All right, cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get on the books. And that's a part of it. But the whole thing is, and I think Melissa Perry talks about it, and she's got the build trap, which was kind of a coincidence. People probably won't believe me, but it came out around the time I was writing this, and I didn't realize it. What really inspired me is I read the book Accelerate by Nicole Forsgren and Gene Kim and Jess Humble. One of my favorite books, one of the most like inspirational, game-changing books I've read in my career as an Agilist. And it's all about the DORA research that they do, DevOps Research Association. And the first half-ish of the book is all about the findings. The second is all about her process. So she's got doctorates in research. She's super smart. I was like, I trust you because I do not have a doctorate in research. I didn't read the second half. But the first half, it's true research on, we measured this thing, or we looked at this thing, and this thing had an impact on whether or not a team was high performing or not. And leadership was a huge part of it. Culture was a huge part of it. Psychological safety. But they also looked at metrics and like what metrics are actually have a correlation to high performing teams. And they're called the 4 key metrics. They have them on a website now. And I was like, wow, that's incredibly fascinating. And I want to share this. So I started writing this talk. And then I was going through it and I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter though how fast you're putting stuff out. It's like throughput was part of it and like time to respond. I'm like, it doesn't matter how fast I'm putting stuff out if the things I'm putting out aren't valuable. Right? Like 80% of features in production don't get used. And like, so we're putting out a lot of unvaluable stuff. So what does it matter if I'm putting it out even faster? And so I actually rewrote the whole talk to start with that. And I tried to take a positive lens. I don't want to be like, you're dumb because you're using metrics for productivity. I more just start with like the story of like, this is why businesses are in business. And, we need to be measuring outcomes and we need to be actually delivering value. And this is how you determine what to build. And then let's look at these metrics and see, do these metrics actually align to what we're trying to do? No? Well, then maybe we're measuring the wrong thing. And this is what we need to be measuring.
I agree with that. I agree with all of that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be very polite to not slide down the slope of what we want to talk to Amanda about. But so, I definitely wholeheartedly agree that story points get abused, that it's very easy to use them in the wrong way, that we need to be focused on measuring outcomes, right? The value of the outcomes, right? We need a way to connect user feedback to those outcomes or to each of the features that are released or PBIs or whatever, and use that as a measurement. But I'm also thinking about the idea that like there's a lot of work that gets abandoned, right? And measuring the work that gets abandoned, deprecated, or whatever you want to call it,
Hmm.
against what's actually been delivered to show the efficiency of not the team, right, but the efficiency of the system. Because the reason why things get deprecated isn't always because of a team, right? It's
Hmm.
usually never just because of the team. It's usually beyond their control, you know? So, how does that fit into your model for how you're thinking about this?
Yeah. So I was having this conversation at Transform with my buddy, Mark Candelora, who's a development manager at my company. And I mentioned that 80% features not being used. And he kind of spun it on its head a little bit and got me thinking. And he was like, well, if we're experimenting and we're failing fast and we're doing things knowing that we have to learn and it's probably not going to be right the first time, he was like, is that a bad thing? And I was like, oh, that's a great way of looking at it. However, I believe this research is more like these are features that are like out there in production and like are staying out there and there's no plan to iterate on them. Right.
Yeah.
So like I'm reluctant to say it, but I'm going to say it. Like Microsoft, right? Look at Microsoft Office. There's a lot of things I like about Microsoft, but Microsoft Office, most of their features don't get used. You look at Word, there's so many things in Word that probably don't get used or don't get used often. And there's a cost to keep those there. Every time they do an update, they have to test all the different functionality, right? So what we tend to teach, right, in product management and product thinking is like, well, you should decide what's not being used and don't keep supporting it, like sunset it.
Or keep it as an optional plugin or something like that, you know?
Right. Yeah. So I think that there's just as much importance in sunsetting things that aren't adding value as there are in adding new things that add value. Like that's the balance that a lot of companies and a lot of product owners and product managers that I've seen just don't do, partially because there's just like this always like, I got to pump new stuff out mindset.
Hey, you know, along those lines, and this is a little bit of a sidebar, I was doing something in Photoshop today and I needed to make an arc. And I went to find the arc tool and I couldn't find the arc tool. Did they get rid of the arc tool?
I don't know. I don't know if I know what the arc tool is off the top of my head.
Well, the tool that lets you, like, you can make a circle, you can make a full circle. It's super easy to make a full
Oh,
circle. But if you want to make like a 35-degree arc, right? Um,
mm-hmm.
like I know you can do that using the pen tool and like S curves and whatnot, but that requires you turning the grid on in the background and using like guidelines and maybe even a protractor that you're holding up to the to the
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah. I do know some of their shape stuff has changed and like their gradients are now like in little folders and like there's some things that they've done
Yeah.
that I'm not a fan of.
I couldn't even find it in the help text. I found articles about how to use it online, but I couldn't find it in the, well, anyhow, we got a guy. We could just talk to Cena and we could ask Cena
Yeah.
to
Yeah. Hook us
research that
up.
for us.
Yeah.
But back to what you were talking about with
Yeah.
regards
Yeah.
to like measuring the value of features and supporting features that customers aren't using anymore. And how do you propose and whose job do you propose is it to measure that, right? Because you've got like X number of product owners and X number of product managers, right?
Hmm.
And we don't have BAs anymore, right? Like we don't
Sometimes.
sometimes, and I think that BAs can be valuable as like assistant POs almost, to where the PO can entrust a BA to go do some investigation on their behalf and bring the findings back and collaborate with the PO to prepare features. But in your model, who's responsible for that and how does that work?
Yeah. I mean, it's in my mind, it's whoever's responsible for the product. So ideally, it's a product manager. You're responsible for it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to do the work of getting the data, but you're responsible for making sure that the data is there
Yeah.
and that it's being tracked. So I would say, yeah, product manager, or if you're in a situation where you're a product owner, sometimes BAs. So my experience in the industry is that you have BAs who are acting like product owners, and then you have product owners who are not empowered, so they're basically BAs. And then you have the added responsibility of, hey, Joe, your day job is something completely different, but you know this product the best, so now you're the product owner. have at it. No training, no nothing, no clue what it means. You're now the product owner.
Yeah.
So I think our product owner area is greatly underserved, which was another talk that I gave at Sensi Deliver last year a little bit, was on the power of product owners and product managers in promoting agility. It's a very underrepresented field right now. So I would say if you're a BA, one of the things that you can do that can really differentiate yourself from other BAs and make you very, very valuable to your organization is to start adopting the product thinking mindset and start looking at those sorts of things. Companies don't naturally think of that sort of stuff. But once again, you paint a pretty picture, right? And you show the problem and you sell it because we're all sellers. Isn't Dan Pink, was it To Be Human is the Sell or something like that?
Yeah.
You need to sell those ideas and it'll be worth it for sure.
Yeah, and I think it ties along to what I was talking about a couple of weeks back with you and Sina about the idea that a developer needs to develop soft skills, right? People skills.
Mm-hmm.
And that having those people skills will make them a better developer. A BA or somebody ancillary to the Scrum team, learning about the role of a product owner, right? And more importantly, like really just getting a sense and background, at least a background understanding of what does it mean to be customer centric, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whole product thinking, and how do you measure? Like oftentimes BAs just get handed, a big sack of bricks and say, this is what you have to build, right? And they're just researching it, and they're not given a chance to say, well, is this the thing that we should really be building? But at least having the knowledge of that type of thinking, it gives you the opportunity to provide that knowledge to other people to maybe help divert the train from going off the tracks that one time, that two times, or every day that it happens. So,
yeah, I think maybe it's a little bit easier for me than other people. I don't know, I'm naturally a rebel or something. In fact, one of my work buddies today was like, I just love how you can still be like outraged at so many different things. Like you still have that passion. Don't ever lose that. And I was like, that's kind of like what is that? Like an insult disguised as a compliment type thing. I forget the term for it, but I was like, wow, okay, I'm gonna have to process that. But when I was a BA, my very first time as a BA, I didn't have training. Most of us don't get training, right? Like that's the reality of the world we live in. We don't get training how to do our jobs. We just do it and we figure it out. And I asked a lot of questions, and I asked stupid questions, and I didn't care that they were stupid. But one of the things is that I cared a lot about whether or not the things that we were doing made sense. And if it didn't make sense, I said, this doesn't make sense. Why are we doing it? And I had those conversations. And my developers were the same way. My developers were just as outraged when they'd be asked to do something that they're like, this is dumb. People don't want this. I mean, I didn't go to the stakeholder and say, this is dumb. Nobody wants this, right? Like that wouldn't be effective. But I questioned it. I said, okay, like, what has led you to think that this is what we should do? Because it's not resonating with me, and I want to make sure I understand the problem we're trying to solve so that we do the right thing for you. And then sometimes it was legit. They were just like, yeah, this is why. And I'm like, oh, wow, that makes total sense now. But other times they're like, oh, well, I'm really trying to do this other thing. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't think this is going to do that for you. Like, let's get you in front of our team to talk about it, and like, let's brainstorm on it and let's figure out what we should be doing. And there was a lot of times too where if it was a light bulb moment for me, like, oh, this makes sense now, I also said, hey, would you tell this to the team directly? Like, I want the team to hear it from you.
I was talking to somebody this morning, right? Because like what you're talking about is taking the call to action, right? And
Yes.
and I was thinking about it from the stance of like, let's say I went to sleep one night and I woke up in the morning, and when I woke up in the morning, I'm in the Matrix and there's Morpheus and he's Jeff Sutherland. And Jeff Sutherland, I know using these two words on a podcast is the worst, or I guess 4 words. And Jeff Sutherland, Morpheus, puts his hands out and says, if you take the blue pill, right, you'll forget everything there is that you've learned about Agile and why this is so important, right? And if you take the red pill, you'll continue down the rabbit hole. There's times where I would definitely gobble up that blue pill.
Right.
Yeah,
the prime pill.
It takes a lot out of you to maintain what your friend says as rage, right? Because it's not rage that you have, right? It's passion and it's drive and it's conviction,
Hmm.
right? But it takes a lot of patience and stamina and fortitude to keep the needle in the passion drive area, right? And not go into the rage. And I feel like we've all had those days where it's just too hard and you slip down that hole and you do get angry, and you lose your cool and it's hard. And I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't take the blue pill. But
Yeah, no. So, like, I don't think I get that angry. I mean, I definitely get angry, but, my wife hears about that. People at work don't hear about it. But I'm very passionate, and I do think that comes off very strongly sometimes to people. And I'm also very direct. And that was a personal choice that I made when I was younger. I adopted a much more direct approach because I felt like it served everyone better in the long run. Uh,
so now that's a
but
common trait that I see in a lot of coaches and scrum masters. My hypothesis is that comes from that place of like, I see how this could be if we could only just pivot a little bit and do things a little bit differently. It'll be great.
yeah,
Is that
yeah.
like where does it come from for you?
So I'll say it's a Midwest thing, right? We're like passive aggressive and we're very nice and we internalize and we just take stuff and take it and take it and take it. And because we want to be nice, right? So radical candor talks about it like, there's a difference between nice and compassion or caring. I forget the word she uses, but to be nice to someone is to be polite, but you could be nice to someone to their detriment. And that's very much a thing in the Midwest. We don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to hurt someone's feelings in the moment. So we're not going to tell them what they need to hear. And what I found was that when I was working in especially the corporate world, is like people would say these things that I didn't agree with. And I would just like, it wasn't a big deal at the time or it was like a small thing. And so I would just be like, I would just take it and I just wouldn't say anything. And I didn't want to be confrontational all the time either. And then it would sometimes grow into something bigger or would happen over and over again to the point where I'm like, all right, now I need to speak up and let you know, like, this is a trend and this is a problem. But because I was very polite and nice up until that point, that even when I came to them and I was trying to be more nice about it and tactful with my words, it was a contrast from what they were used to from me. And I was like, so suddenly now I'm not the nice guy that's just nodding my head. I'm the one telling them that they're doing something wrong, and I'm the asshole, and that they didn't like that. And I was like, okay, that's weird to me because I don't feel like I'm saying anything that mean. But then the other observation I had is that there were people that were saying those things or saying worse things all the time, and it was just accepted. And so then I'm an observer, so I started observing, and I was like, hey, this guy who started this company and was just vocal all the time, he can say way worse things than I can, and people just listen to it and accept it, and it's okay. So it must be this contrast of I was quiet, I was accepting for all this time, and now it's like a character flip on people. So I'm going to start by just being direct all the time, hopefully not an asshole, right? Like I don't want to be an asshole about it, but just, laying it out on the table. And more times than not, I would say I've been more successful with that approach. People appreciate it because they know what I'm thinking and they feel like I'm a genuine person. And ultimately, I care about them and I want what's best for them. And that's one of the great things about our job as Agile coaches is like our job is to make other people successful. And people think it's like to judge them and so they can be very defensive. I'm very transparent with that. Like, my job is for you to succeed. I'm successful when you're successful.
Yeah, I had that talk with a product owner at a company that I was working at a while back, where I set aside a meeting with him early on, and I was like, basically saying what you're saying, and I was like, how cool would it be for us to be able to partner together and think of all the and he got silent, and then it was weird, and he said goodbye, and then I got a phone call from my manager, and apparently the way that it came off was you can't be successful without Drew. And I was like, where did you get that? Where did you get that idea? I'm not saying that you can't be successful without me, you know?
Yeah.
And I've checked in years later with people who still work with him, but he's still this like lone wolf kind of like, we talk about like customer centricity. This person puts himself in the product as the most important, like even ahead of the
Mm-hmm.
customers. But let's get back to the velocity trap. What I want to know from you
Mm-hmm.
is what are some of the questions the audience members had for you during
Um,
your presentation?
how did you become so amazing? Um, no. Oh, that's a good question. I would say sometimes I don't get any questions, which is concerning because I'm like, did I overwhelm people? Am I just so amazing? I nailed it. This last time, I did get some good questions. I also feel like I have the memory of a goldfish. So some of them were on clarity around it. The one person was really struggling with velocity and why I was saying we shouldn't use it. And so we had a little bit of a conversation about that. And I feel like we're dragging the audience on, but definitely something to go into a lot more in our no estimates episode. But really just kind of explaining how the things that she's looking to solve with velocity, she could do with throughput as well. And so it's not that velocity isn't effective for how it's meant to be used. It's that you can solve it in another way that takes less effort and isn't as likely to be abused. And then I had people come up at the end to talk to me. So at the beginning, I had my updated picture that I showed you beforehand. So I have a picture of myself and one of you that I've drawn by hand, well, by computer, that I used in our promotional image that I've been meaning to reuse in something. And I added the headphones that I have now with the blue pads as a reminder to promote our podcast and just like be like, hey, I do a podcast. You should totally check us out. I actually had several people at the end stop by and say like, oh, hey, you do a podcast. Like, what's your podcast again? Like, I want to check it out. And so it was definitely a lot more like praise at the end than necessarily questions about it. So I'm just going to say like, I'm awesome at this talk, I guess. I don't know.
Well, you've done it, what, 5 times?
Something like that, yeah. I read around a
Yeah.
handful of times, and I wrote it years ago, and I recorded a version digitally that's not as full on my YouTube. Um,
Well, then, what kinds of questions have you gotten about it or challenges even in years past, like since you've been given this?
I think the biggest thing is just like how to get started is the question. And it's because we feel like we're so stuck in our productivity metrics scenario where it's like these are the metrics that leadership is telling us that they want. And so I feel obligated to provide them to them. And I'm saying those metrics, those productivity metrics, while they may be important to your team for how you operate and how you perform, leadership, in particular, your stakeholders, should not care about your productivity metrics. What they should care about is what is the value that you're bringing for them. My advice for that is that people care about what you tell them to care about. And so if you have like a sprint review and at every sprint review, you're showing your velocity over the last 3 sprints and like, here's my line, look, here's how much we got done, here's how much we carried over, you're telling them that this is important and they need to care about it. But if you start showing, look, here's how many users we have, here's how fast people adopted this new feature, here's this other value item, here's how we're trending towards this outcome, you're telling them the outcome's important and this is what I need to care about.
Yeah, I agree with 99%. And it's so
All right,
funny
I'll take it.
that your big soapbox topic is one that we conflict a little bit on.
Mm-hmm.
And I am really wanting to talk. Like I've been holding back so much, so we definitely need to commit to. I hope that Amanda can make it next Thursday so that we can duke it out about my thoughts and ideas around why I like story points, but not as an upstream metric.
Mm-hmm.
Just to clarify, I don't want anybody getting the wrong idea about me. So
Yeah. So And that's only one of my talks. I do have several. The other one that I'm giving at Good Tech Fest is Deliver Like the Mang.
Deliver
So
like the what?
the Mang,
The
like what's up,
Ming?
Mang? Maang. So like it used to be
Oh,
Fang, now it's Mang. Meta, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google. And the whole thing is like we in the agile industry, we've adopted these frameworks, right? Like I've installed Scrum, I've installed Safe, I've installed, these frameworks. I have the roles. I'm working in sprints. Why can I not release as fast as Amazon? And the whole concept and aha moment behind it is that when we look at like Scrum and Safe uses Scrum, our development team is 3 to 9 developers. We have one product owner and we have one Scrum Master. Yet all of our trainings, our books, our certifications are all targeted towards our Scrum Masters and our product owners. And when our developers are learning to work in a Scrum or Safe or Agile fashion, we just tell them, Amazon does it, figure it out. And so we don't give them the support they need. And so the whole premise of that talk, which is one I'm also very passionate about, is about teaching Agile coaches and Scrum Masters and leaders who are not technical about the technical challenges that go into working in an Agile way and the different ways that we need to actually create our code and our structure without showing any code at all.
wait, say that one more time. So who are the learners? The learners here are developers.
So this, I mean, it would benefit developers that don't know these things, but I give it at Agile conferences. So the idea is more around the people that are influencing developers and the people who are trying to promote Agile adoption. So our Agile coaches, our Scrum Masters, and managers who aren't technical, they don't understand, because they've never been developers, that there are things that you have to do differently as a programmer to enable agility. It's not as easy as
Gotcha.
just saying, here's a small story, now you can release, every 2 weeks.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I brought this up on the Cena episode as well, right? Like developers are like, they're coming out. They know how to put their fingers in the keyboard and write code, but nobody's teaching them the soft skills. Nobody's teaching them how to be a member of a Scrum team.
What's interesting is Scrum.org did create a course called the Professional Scrum Developer, the PSD, and they couldn't sell it. So last I knew, it wasn't really offered anywhere. I ended up just taking the test because I had a trainer at our company at the time who was certified to give it, and he kept having to cancel because he didn't have enough people sign up. So I'm like, all right, I'm just taking the test. And I took it because I wanted to see if it was a good recommendation for our other Scrum Masters to be like, hey, this is a good way to kind of like round out your awareness of these things. The course, I was told there was actually coding in it. I don't know since I didn't take it. The test, I would say, was maybe a little bit more in the weeds than I would expect. Like I don't expect Scrum Masters to know about like dry and solid and other coding principles like that. But there was a lot of high level stuff from like the DevOps handbook type thing that I think a lot of Agile coaches would benefit from learning.
No, I fully agree with that. And earlier in my career, I would shy away from being anywhere near like systems teams because I felt like, I've never been a developer. I don't understand architecture and I need to leave those guys alone and let somebody else coach them. But then I started leading into it because I realized like, I can't limit myself in that way. And I started, researching CI/CD pipelines and DevOps principles and DevOps practices. And while there's definitely great coaches who should be coaching DevOps practices, it's not something I'm afraid of anymore. But look, listen, it's getting kind of late and I really think I need to go pick up dinner,
And
and
this is long.
this is a long one, but it was a valuable one, right? Like you just got back from this conference and we need to do some knowledge sharing, right?
Definitely.
So thank you for carving out the time to do this. I know we weren't planning on doing this and I'm glad we did it,
For sure. Yeah.
I do have one metric milestone that I want to point out that we've passed. I had to update the website because we have more episodes than can fit on the homepage. without
Ooh.
pagination now. So now on our website, too many W's, agileforagilists.com, there is a new header in the menu bar called Archives, where you can see all of our episodes. And the homepage, I think, is just displaying the top 6 or the top 8 or something like that. And I even gave a brand new layout for it. So, and also on the website is our Memo FM voice recorder feedback tool. So if there's something that you've enjoyed about this podcast, or if you want to try to ask Brad a question about Velocity
Ooh.
Trap that he will remember,
100%. Yeah.
then,
That's why I need the recording.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, at the beginning of the month, we hit 500 plays.
Yeah, that's true too. I think I looked today, we're almost at 700, or are we over the 700 mark now?
I didn't check today, admittedly.
Yeah. The Amanda episode, the Capital One episode, is 3 times as popular as every one of the other episodes.
Gosh, it's that Amanda. She just kills it.
We just got to be aware of any time there's 1,500 people that get laid off in our industry and spin up a podcast about it again, and with the clickbaity title.
Right. Yeah. Take advantage of your despair.
Well, this was a good one. And I'm looking forward to next Thursday. I'll reach out to Amanda and we'll get it on the books.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'll see you Monday for our next episode too. So.
Yeah. We've got 2 episodes we're recording next week. And they're going to be good ones.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, Drew.